Billy Napier does it again. Not a single one on the Ohio State schedule has looked impressive. Maybe aside from Washington, Arch is not ready. He doesn't really look like he knows what he's looking at. Practicing victory formation in practice is crazy. If Florida State goes 10-2, they're in the playoff. I think they're in the playoff. I only think there are 3 elite teams in the country. If you think you hate the AP enough, you don't. I said it on Friday. It's whenever we have these slates of college football where there's nothing, we're glancing over it, go to your fall weddings, whatever. Boom, boom, boom. You have the most craziest upsets we've seen all year. And welcome to the Hot Seat of College Football Show. I am Trent, your host, on a beautiful Sunday morning as we are wrapping up maybe the most shocking week of college football we have seen all year. Obviously, we had a lot of really interesting upset type weeks last year. This was exactly that. I said it on Friday. It's whenever we have these slates of college football where there's nothing, we're glancing over it, go to your fall weddings, whatever. Boom, boom, boom. You have the most craziest upsets we've seen all year. We saw with Penn State, we saw maybe one of the most craziest upsets we've seen all year. That Penn State reaction will be its own separate video that will be coming out later today or tomorrow. So watch out for that Penn State UCLA reaction. We're not going to get into it this one just because it wasn't on our bet board, but I will get in and talk about that video in its own separate reaction. So make sure you go watch that video coming out later today or tomorrow. But let's talk about some of the games we're going to talk about in this video. And what a day of college football we had. We're going to get into the AP poll as well. Let me bring up my notes. So we're going to cover some of these big games that we had. But first, let's cover over how we did on our predictions and our betting. We did okay. We went, here, let me, this one? Yes. So we are currently 40 for 64 at 63%. We jumped up 3% or 2%. So we're close to that 65, which is what we wanted to go to. So if we scroll over to week 6, there we go. So we went 7 of 3. We missed on the Texas one, and it was one of the things where this week specifically, I don't know if I would have changed any of my predictions, kind of like knowing what I know. The Florida one was just really shocking. The fact that Arch couldn't get the ball out in time, I mean, that one was pretty shocking to me. Louisville losing was pretty shocking. I really thought Louisville was much better. That Virginia team's real, man. And then Iowa State losing. Really had a nice comeback in that second half, but down 31-7. Man, that is tough to come back through. And they tried. They had the ball last, so if they weren't even in Hail Mary range, but if they were, man, you could try for that. But they get through. But yeah, starting off today, does not look like we were doing very well because I'm pretty sure the noon slate was the Iowa Cincinnati game. The Iowa State, the noon slot yesterday was absolutely horrendous. And the only good game was that Baylor-Kansas State game, which I was like, oh my God. I picked Baylor, then I picked Kansas State, and now Kansas State's going to win. They were up 31-17 in the third. And then Baylor comes all the way back. Sawyer to Triggs, the beautiful one-handed grab, come all the way back, kick a 56-yard field goal, and then Kansas State goes to kick like a 55-yarder. It gets blocked. Baylor wins in the upset. And it was so weird because it was such a competitive game, but the stadium was almost completely empty because it was so hot. If you didn't know, outside yesterday, even in Ohio, which is kind of a northern state, it was like 80 degrees. So it had to be like 95, 100 degrees in Baylor. Like everyone left. All the part of the stadiums that weren't in the shade, everyone just left. So it was like mostly empty. But Baylor comes across with the win. What else was those earlier slots? I think those ones for the noon. But then we did better. Louisville lost, Texas lost. I'm like, but then Nebraska won, Texas Tech won, Notre Dame won. We got some of those easier predictions in, and then the Miami came away, Bama won, A&M pulled away. So we did okay. 7-3 isn't horrible. That's kind of what I would like to. The 6-4, 7-3 is what I want to shoot to every week. I do want to get a perfect week sometime this year. I would like it to be a full bracket. What I mean by that is like a full slate. I pick 10 games. So obviously when we get to the playoffs or conference championships, there's going to be less games. So I would like to go perfect then, but I would like to have a perfect 10 out of 10. This was one of the weeks where I thought maybe we could do it. The problem was just there was a lot of like this Texas-Florida game was really like, did we really know what was going to happen? Florida hasn't looked great, and Texas hasn't played anybody aside from Ohio State, and they lost. So that was how those games are. We're going to go into deeper depth out of some of these. Let me pull up. So let's start off with what you want to do. Let's start off with Texas A&M versus Mississippi State. So this was a game that I actually really wanted to pick Mississippi State, and if it was a home game for Mississippi State, I actually think I would probably pick them maybe. And this was a game where Mississippi State was up 3-0 in the first quarter. It was 7-3 at half. A&M couldn't do anything on offense, and Blake Shapen was turning the ball over. It was a back and forth. Blake Shapen did not really play great. Mississippi State just couldn't do anything on the A&M defense, which if you're an A&M fan, that is like, let's go. Because remember, this Mississippi State offense put up 34 points on Tennessee, put up 24 points on Arizona State, which I get it's Arizona State, but they won the Big 12 last year. This Mississippi State team has been good on offense, and A&M has been phenomenal on offense, but it's been that defense that's been lacking, which historically has been a strength for A&M. And for 2 weeks in a row against Auburn and now Mississippi State, which I think for the SEC has a good offense, limiting to only 9 points. I mean, I watch out for A&M to maybe win the SEC. I'm still not necessarily sold on teams like Ole Miss just because of that defense. And Trinidad Chambliss, yes. Is he phenomenal? Yes. Is he a Heisman contender? Maybe. But I've seen a lot out of Ole Miss that doesn't make me want to consistently throughout tough game. Like I get the win over LSU is great, but Lane Kiffin has one of those wins every year. Last year he had the big one versus Georgia. Georgia was much better than Ole Miss last year. Marcel Reed lit it up in the fourth quarter. They had 17 points, winning 31-9. That was one of the primetime games that was being overshadowed by the Florida State Miami game. But if you watch that one, good win by A&M. I think they actually jumped up in the AP poll. But we'll get to that when we get to the AP poll. Let's do Texas, Florida. So Texas, remember AP number 1. Preseason Heisman favorite with Arch. I mean, they were the second coming of Tim Tebow. They could not be stopped. Now falling to 3-2, and they're actually out of it. Same with Penn State. They have fallen completely out of the top 25, which if you are an Ohio State and Oregon fan really sucks because your best wins were over Texas and Penn State, which were the AP number 1 and number 2 team in the country. And especially for Ohio State, not only is your best win out of the top 25, you play Penn State, which a week and a half ago, if they would have won Oregon, I was going to say this game, Ohio State, Penn State had the chance of being number 1 versus number 2. And obviously Ohio State, Texas was a number 1 versus number 2 in the coaches poll, number 1 versus number 3 in the AP poll. So you had 2 top 3 matchups, and you think you're going to win that game if you're Ohio State, but now they're both unranked. We'll see where they are when they play in week 10. Ohio State and Penn State. But really unfortunate for Ohio State in that schedule because in the preseason, that schedule looked very tough. You played the 2 best teams in the country at the polls. You're at Michigan, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, at Washington, and all of those teams have been disappointing. Not a single one on the Ohio State schedule has looked impressive, maybe aside from Washington. And I get they won against Maryland yesterday, but they won 24-20. They were down 20-0 in the third quarter. So we will see where Washington goes. But it really looks like in the Big Ten, it is Ohio State, Oregon, and then maybe Indiana, maybe Michigan, maybe USC. I don't know. Maybe even Illinois if they beat Ohio State. But yeah, so with this Texas-Florida game, Texas got jumped from the absolute start. This was the thing where when I was finishing watching up the Kansas State-Baylor game, I jump over to the Texas-Florida game, and Florida already has the lead, and then they actually kick a field goal. So they're up 10-0 in the first. Texas fights on the field. They score. Arch looks fine in the first half. But I think they were down 19-7. And the reason why it was 19-7, because it was actually 17-7, and Texas had a blocked punt that was returned almost for a touchdown, but it went in the back of the end zone, so it was for a safety. So they're down by a ton. Arch threw a pick in the first half, I'm pretty sure. In the second half, he had a really bad interception. And talk about a redemption game from Eugene Wilson, that awesome sideline trip walking touchdown where he broke 2 tackles, spun out of a couple. Arch, and I have had videos on Arch before. Arch is not ready. He doesn't really look like he knows what he's looking at. He holds onto the ball for way too long. That rebuilt Texas offensive line struggled against that Florida defensive line. And so, Florida's been bad, and we know about what Florida is. But even Jake Slaughter, that offensive line has been disappointing. But man, that Florida defense has been phenomenal this season. Their defensive line is hungry. They're fast. They're twitchy. They sacked Arch 6 times that day. There's a couple ones where it actually should have been a couple more sacks, because he would get hit and then he would throw the ball away, or he would about to get sacked, throw the ball, and it get intercepted. So it actually kind of should have been maybe a couple more sacks. But 6 is plenty enough for that defense. So yeah, Arch had 2 interceptions. It should have been 3, but the guy dropped it. And that was the second last play of the game. They tried to spike it to get a Hail Mary. The clock ran out. So they lose that one 29-21. And kind of my questions with Florida, if you know, at the end of all of the After the Whistle episode, which is our Sunday show to recap the week of college football, is we do a which coach is has the hottest hot seat. Billy Napier does it again. I mean, I don't know what to say. He keeps doing this where he starts off the season 1-3 or 1-5, has an absolutely abysmal record, losing to teams like USF. Even when they played LSU played terrible, and they literally could not do anything on offense. But then he does this. I mean, if you remember last year, Florida had that ridiculously tough schedule. But they had high hopes to start the season when they played Miami, and Miami absolutely dog walked them. And they had a losing record, but then, they won a couple games, I think versus Kentucky, and, they won a couple games. They were competitive against Georgia once DJ Lagway started to play. Obviously, he got hurt in that game. Honestly, if DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt in that Georgia game last year, I think Florida wins. But then they finished the season with huge wins over LSU and Ole Miss, and obviously they beat Tulane in that bowl game to finish with 8 wins. And that's kind of what we're seeing out of Florida this year. They were a top 15 team to start off the season. I'm pretty sure they lost. They lost to USF, then LSU, and then who they play after they lost. Oh, they lost to Miami. But then, people are like, well, watch out. This is kind of what Billy Napier does. And then he goes in and he beats Texas. And honestly, I don't know if I'm upset or happy if I'm a Florida fan, because you want this guy gone. I'm sorry, I don't care how many times he does these really the upset wins over Texas or LSU or Georgia or Ole Miss. How many times he does this, he's going to look bad. Why does it take Florida this long to look good? Billy's never going to get fired. You're going to go through this every year. You're going to have insane hype in the offseason with DJ Lagway or whoever your quarterback is. You're going to lose a ton of games that you shouldn't have lost or shouldn't have got blown out in. You have a huge win which reels you back in. Maybe you win the Pop-Tart Bowl or whatever. And then the cycle repeats. And it's absolutely miserable if I'm a Florida fan. I don't think Florida is going to have a winning record. But we will see if they fire Billy Napier. But Florida pulls this one out 29-21. They had the lead for the entire game. Texas was trailing the whole time. So good win by them. And that will take us to the other 3:30 game that we had. This is where game day was, where Theo Vaughn was. This was Alabama hosting number 16 Vanderbilt. Alabama now in the top 10. This game, did we think Vanderbilt was going to do it again? Probably not. But this game I actually thought was pretty good. The end score was 30-14. That was not at all what that game was. This was a really, really competitive game for the most part. Bama pulled away late. If you're asking me, really, I think this game should have been like 23-20 because Ty Simpson, he throws the interception, and then Vanderbilt has that long, like 65-yard touchdown run. And they're up 7-0, and then they're actually about to go up 10-0 because Diego Pavia has a huge run. That was something. There was a bunch of huge runs in this game from Jam Miller and Diego Pavia. And Pavia keeps like a read option or whatever, and then fumbles the ball. So that would have made them go up 10-0. It was 14-14 at half. Bama scored late. So really you should have seen like Vanderbilt was up 17-14. And then they had an interception where they should have just been conservative and kick a field goal. So I think Vanderbilt could have had 6 more points. And then Bama scored a late touchdown, which is like, just take a knee. Why are we scoring a touchdown there? I mean, I get it. They beat you. But really it should have been like something like a 23-20, 26-20. So the game was much closer than the actual score was. I still, Vanderbilt's a good team, and so is Alabama. I think Bama's a really good team. I still don't think they're elite. Yes, is Vanderbilt good, but they're not Ohio State, Miami, Oregon. So I wanted, obviously they beat Georgia, and we thought Georgia was elite. We maybe still think they are. I don't really know yet. We'll see how that Tennessee win for Georgia kind of shakes out. I want to see kind of what Tennessee does. They play Oklahoma soon. Which I actually think they will have John Mateer. I think John Mateer is going to play in that Texas Red River game next week. So that hopefully they are. What else do I have for this game? But yeah, I really don't think there's any elite teams in the SEC. I think all the elite teams are in the Big Ten and Miami. I think there's only 3 elite teams. I still think that Vanderbilt's a good team. I will say, practicing victory formation in practice is crazy. If you won the game, that's the coolest thing ever, but you kind of look stupid now for practicing victory formation before the game. And that'll take us to the last game I want to cover in depth, and that is number 3 Miami going on the road to number 18 Florida State. This is a game where Miami was favored by 4.5. I almost wanted to take Florida State in this game, but I really thought that this run game for Miami and stopping the run for Florida. But the thing with Florida State is Gus Malzahn likes to run the ball, and you are not going to run the ball on this team. The final score was 28-22. That is not at all what this game was. This game was 28-3 in the fourth. Carson Beck balled out, going 20 for 27, 241, and 4 touchdowns. Every single score came from Carson Beck that night. Castellanos went 25 for 45, 272. Had 2 touchdowns, but also had 2 interceptions. They were bad interceptions. They were like getting pressured, throwing into double coverage down the field, just trying to throw a Hail Mary when you really didn't have to, and it was 1st and 10 at midfield. Trying to think what else. Miami had this play where Carson Beck, they had like a flea flicker reverse. And that was a cool touchdown. It fooled their defense. But yeah, no, this game wasn't close. Ruben Bain, I think he's the best edge rusher in the country. He dominated the tackles for Florida State. And when I noticed when I was watching that game, it was like, oh my God, look, the tackles are collapsing. So Castellanos would have to step up and throw every time. But then the interior was collapsing and he had to scramble out, which would lead Ruben Bain to get him. It was just, what a nightmare for Tommy Castellanos. But yeah, looking at this game, I don't think Miami's the best team in the country. I think they have the best resume. Are they the most complete? No, I still want to see a little more from this receiving game. I get they had the really cool catch against Notre Dame, but I want to see maybe a little more explosiveness that isn't trick plays. What is on my camera? I don't know. But yeah, I do think Miami's the most balanced team with Ohio State. I think Ohio State and Miami are the most balanced teams in the country. But yeah, Miami absolutely dominated Florida State. There was a lot of jarring going after the game. That was kind of funny. Obviously, this is a huge rivalry. Now Miami 2-0 in the past 3 years. I guess Florida State won 3 years ago. So with Florida State, they're not out of it because with Bama looking at what they are, I get it was week 1. I think we know Bama's better than Florida State. If Florida State is 10-2, that means they are 10-2 with losses over Miami, who now in the AP is the number 2 team in the country, and Virginia, who is a top 20 team, with wins over, I get maybe don't have the best record, but a blowout win versus Alabama. They would have a win over at Clemson, which I get Clemson's not very good, but it's still at Clemson, and Florida. So, is that actually, let me see. The Miami, Florida, it is a road game. So you'd have wins at Florida, at Clemson, and Alabama. And if Bama's 10-2, I guess, what if Bama goes 10-2, they're ranked like 10th or 9th, they lose the SEC championship, they're 10-3 versus a Florida State that's 10-2 team who has a head-to-head win. Do you put Florida State in? I don't know. They're ranked 25th right now, which means that they're still ranked. If they keep winning, they're only going to go up, which I would think that means if Florida State goes 10-2, they're in the playoff. I think they're in the playoff. I don't think you can ignore that win over Florida State. But yeah, no, I think Ohio State, Miami, and Oregon are the only elite teams in the country. I only think there are 3 elite teams in the country, and it is those 3. With Oregon, they're on a bye, so you can't really say much. They looked fine against Penn State. Now, not knowing if maybe Penn State is that great. R.I.P. to Jim Knowles. But I want to see a little more from the trench. I don't know, because they couldn't stop the run. Then they played Penn State and stopped the run. But then UCLA stopped the run against Penn State. So now I don't know. This is what I mean. Like, I want to see a little more from Oregon. They are going to host Indiana this week. That'll be a huge matchup. I cannot wait. That is the 3:30 game. But yeah, that is what I have for my notes on those games. Let's hop over to the AP poll. Here, there we go. So, Ohio State is number 1 with 40 first place votes. And now kind of going further in the season, we're seeing teams, the first place votes getting spread out throughout these teams. Miami jumps up to 2. Oregon gets bummed down to 3 off of a bye. I swear, Oregon's all over the place. They started at like 7, then they're at 4, then they're at 3, then 6, then 2, and now 3. They're just getting thrown all over the place. Doesn't really matter if you keep winning. I think Oregon's going to go 12-0. Honestly, I could see these top 3 teams all going 12-0, which is absolutely crazy. Think about that. If Ohio State and Oregon go 12-0, would it be number 1 versus number 2? Probably not. Well, I don't know. If Oregon has blowout wins over Washington, who I think will be ranked, and Indiana, and I think also USC. Do they play USC? I don't really know. But yeah, I would like it to be number 1 versus number 2. We've been so close. The Oregon Ohio State game last year could have been number 1 versus number 2. If we won against Michigan last year, we would have played Oregon in the Big Ten title. It would have been number 1 versus number 2. Ohio State Texas should have been number 1 versus number 2. Ohio State Penn State could have been number 1 versus number 2. I really just want to have a number 1 versus number 2 again. I think the last time we had that was it 2006? When we played Michigan and won that one. I guess aside from the BCS. But no, that would be awesome to have a number 1 of those number 1 versus number 2. Actually, maybe it was Texas in, I think, 2007. And then we played, I don't know. But we got Ole Miss at 4, A&M at 5, Oklahoma at 6, which gets bumped down. They had a good win, but obviously A&M had the really big win. And actually, no, I'm going to keep Oklahoma where they are. I docked them a little bit without John Mateer, but now it looks like they're going to have John Mateer versus Texas. Will he be at full capacity? We'll see. Michael Hawkins, the backup quarterback for Oklahoma, looked decent against Kent State. It is Kent State. Indiana at 7. Bama jumps up 2 spots to 8. So does Texas Tech and Georgia at 9 and 10. LSU now at 11. So now if the playoff started today, Tennessee would be the first team out. When LSU would be in the playoff, they would go on the road to play Oklahoma, which would be a rematch because I think they play in Oklahoma too this year. But Tennessee at 12. Georgia Tech at 13. Why is Georgia Tech above Missouri? I have absolutely no idea. But Missouri at 14. Michigan at 15. Notre Dame up 5 spots to 16. That's good. So at 10 and 2, they're definitely going to make the playoffs. I mean, look, they're already so close. And if they go 10, they're going to make the playoff. They're going to go 10 and 2. Illinois up to 17. So when Ohio State plays them, it's going to be number 1 versus number 17. BYU at 18. Virginia at 19, getting some respect. Vanderbilt at 20. Arizona State at 21. Iowa State at 22. Memphis 23. South Florida 24. Florida State 25. Teams getting votes: Cincinnati, Texas, Penn State, Utah, Nebraska, USC, UNLV, North Texas, TCU, Washington, Mississippi State, Navy, Louisville, and Auburn getting 1 vote. And if you see what I see is, what are we doing? The AP, like, if you ever thought the AP poll could get worse, if you don't hate the media enough, like, if you think you hate the AP enough, you don't. Why is Iowa State above Cincinnati? Cincinnati beat them. They have the same record, and Cincinnati's not ranked. What are we doing? Like, I mean, okay, Cincinnati's 4-1. Iowa State's 5-1. I mean, that's the same record. They just played in week 0. Like, what are we doing? Why is Cincinnati not ranked, but Iowa State is? That is the AP poll. A joke as always. And I think the last thing I wanted to pull up was, was there anything else? Yeah, we're going to cover the Ohio State Minnesota game in its own video, so I'm not going to worry about that. Yeah, I'll talk about some of these other games quickly. Texas Tech looked good over Houston. Kind of, it wasn't a blowout, but Wegman went down, so they rolled easy. Georgia over Kentucky. Game actually should have been closer. Kentucky could have scored a touchdown at the end of the half, which would have made it a 21-14 game. And then they could have scored again. I mean, this game could have been 35-28. Kentucky just gives Georgia trouble. Illinois allowed a bunch of points to Purdue. This Purdue offense has been super surprising. Michael Hawkins went 14-24 for 3 touchdowns, so he looked decent. BYU had a nice Friday night game over West Virginia. But I guess now that will bring us to the end of the episode, where I will talk about who is the hottest coach. Pause. Which coach has the hottest hot seat this week? And who do we think? Honestly, if you're asking me, I think it has to be James Franklin. 2 weeks. Is this 2 weeks in a row? James Franklin is a 2-time hot seat winner. I guess loser. That's not a good thing. But man, what a disappointment. I guess Michigan looked fine against Wisconsin. I forgot to cover that game. But no, with James Franklin, ooh, it's getting rough. It is getting rough if you are a Nittany Lion fan. I mean, you guys are probably all dead anyways. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching the Hot Seat of College Football show. There will be a couple more videos dropping tonight and tomorrow about Ohio State, Minnesota, and Penn State, UCLA. I would highly recommend go watching those videos. Go watch some of the videos we released the past couple days talking about our top 10 offenses, our top 25. We actually, in those videos, we predicted that I actually had Penn State and Texas really low. So I guess we were right. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching today's Week 6 episode of After the Whistle. And we will see you guys later. Thank you.